you have a favorite Ted story? Is there one that just makes you smile?
I don't even know if this one's true. It's the Pedro Ramos story, where supposedly he struck out Ted early on, and then at Fenway during BP, they send him over the next day to have him sign the ball. It's like, oh, he'll like that. Go over there. And of course he doesn't speak English or anything, and they shuffles over to and Ted's holding court in the dugout. Yeah, Bush, what do you want? And Mr. Williams, I strike you out. You sign my ball, and then he of course airs him out. Oh, you Bush League SOB and all this stuff. Well, who the hell are you? And then of course he makes him cry, but then signs his ball and sends him off. And it's like, yeah, get out of here, Bush. And within a short amount of time, Ted faces him again, hits one 9 rows over the bullpen, rounding first base. I'll sign that son of a bitch too if you never find it. I don't know if it's true, but it's good.
How do you like this for a setting? The 400 hitter of today at the plate, Ted Williams.
When you think of hitting, you think of Ted Williams. You think of 400.
One thing I've always wanted to do, pitch against the best hitter of all time, Ted Williams. All right, 3-2, bases loaded.
He has only one purpose in life, is to take a piece of turned ash and try to hit some cowhide coming at it at upwards of 100 miles an hour.
All 4.
Everything was about how you could become a better hitter.
My first meeting with Ted, I'm 18 years old. I walk up to him and I said, excuse me, Mr. Williams, I'm a big fan, read your book and everything. He says, damn it, can you hit? Sorry about that, sorry.
He would talk to me about having dreams and hitting against Randy Johnson in his dreams. He would reenact at-bats that never happened.
Living me a life, changing a life.
He just loved hitting more than anyone who ever lived.
I'm cocky enough and believe that I rank with some of the greatest hitters in this game, and I'm proud of that.
He was the last man to hit 400. Ted Williams!
What is it about hitting that just turns you on so much?
Pure and simple, it's the hardest single thing to do in baseball.
So actually what you're doing is chopping. Chopping just like a woodsman would.
He had an inquiring mind. He was always a student of the game. He knew all the pitchers and what their tendencies were. He was ahead of his time that way.
I can't believe the guy not finding out every bit of information that he can on how to hit a baseball.
Long before video, long before some of the more sophisticated theories of hitting and weight shift, look at his hip movement. Look at the weight shift. Look at the slight uppercut. He figured it out on his own.
As you start forward, your hips initiate the move, since your hips have to be out of the way before you can come through with the bat.
There's a great picture that hangs in Fenway Park now of Ted Williams in a towel after he came out of the shower, swinging a bat. Because that's what Ted Williams did. He practiced his swing obsessively.
Now, you turned it into a science. You obviously wrote a book about it.
I think that if I give myself one bit of credit, it was that I thought about what I had to do as much as any hitter.
Gee whiz, it's all I ever wanted to do, and for sure, it was the thing I could do best in my life.
I'm sure I'm not the only one he told this story to, but I was among them. And he said his dream as a kid, even before he was signed to a professional contract, was that one day he would walk down the street and people would say, there goes the best damn hitter who ever lived.
That quest to become the best damn hitter that ever lived began for Ted Williams unmistakably, unforgettably, in 1941.
The golden boy of Boston's outfield, Ted Williams, who promises to be one of the all-time batting stars of the game.
When Ted would share the stage that season with another all-time great, as two of the most remarkable baseball performances in history unfolded.
1941, that's a memorable year, yes.
Joe DiMaggio in New York came first with his 56-game hitting streak.
He hit safely in every game from May 15th to July 16th.
But then, as summer turned into fall, the brash young character from Boston took center stage, making a bid for an immortal mark.
All eyes are on this man, Ted Williams, gunning for a 400 season.
And doing it in a way that captured the nation's attention. The only way he knew how, boldly, confidently, fearlessly.
God, I had desire to want to do it. The holy, Jesus.
75 years later, the accomplishment seems more remarkable than ever. The story begins that season, however, with Williams nowhere to be found.
As 1941 dawned, when the Red Sox gathered for spring training in Florida, there was no sign of Ted Williams. Joe Cronin, the manager, at one point exasperatedly said, well, we're here, and when Ted decides to show up, we'll deal with it then. Eventually, Ted did present himself, and he said he just had lost track of time. He'd been hunting in the wilds of Minnesota.
Ted Williams returns to spring training in Sarasota, Florida, to sharpen his fielding skills and his great love hitting the baseball.
And then right away in spring training, he tweaks his ankle. Couldn't do sliding drills. He couldn't do defensive drills. Really, all he could do during spring training was hit.
If I had one advantage that year, it was this. I was getting so damn much batting practice, the most batting practice I ever got in my life. God, I was sharp as hell, Christ, I'm really getting batting practice.
Ultimately, he was able to be in uniform for opening day, and he pinch hit on opening day.
So Williams' first hit of the season came as a pinch hitter, and he sparked a ninth-inning rally to help the Sox to an opening day win. Over the next week, he'd remain on the bench, but then finally entered the starting lineup on April 29th, going 2 for 3 with a home run.
Williams wallops a tremendous drive into the center field bleachers.
The path to 400 had begun.
So, Dan, when was the first time you met Ted?
Well, it's probably with you. I mean, spring training, when I would come down there starting in '86, he sat down. There was like 15 or 20 of us. No one said a word. He looked up and said, "Scared to death, aren't you?" And we were.
Well, my first was 1969, my first full year with the Globe. I was over doing a sidebar. And we talked for like 45 minutes. And I remember him saying to me, "Kid, you love baseball. That's a good thing." And out I went, and that's how we started.
Ted, in the era that you played baseball at your peak, you were always compared to Joe DiMaggio. What were your opinions of Joe as a ball player?
Well, I think he was the greatest player I saw. He had style, he had class, he had smoothness. He did everything great.
Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio. Their names will forever be linked together. The greatest players on storied rivals in the golden age of baseball. But if you went back to the early summer of 1941, you'd find that Joe D., not Ted, was front and center in the spotlight.
It's an interesting summer because the first part of the baseball season is really characterized by DiMaggio's streak.
Not since 1897, when wee Willie Keeler set the world record of hitting safely, have baseball fans seen a hitting champion like this.
It's probably one of the great footnotes in baseball history that on May 15, 1941, 2 hitting streaks began. Obviously, we know about one, Joe DiMaggio's, but Ted Williams began a hitting streak that day also, which lasted 23 straight games.
Sharing 1941's batting limelight was the golden boy of Boston's outfield.
By June 1st, the 22-year-old Williams was batting .431.
The thing about those 2 streaks is that Williams hit almost 100 points higher than DiMaggio. DiMaggio would get his hit and would move on. Ted Williams was always getting 2 and 3 hits per day, and suddenly his batting average began to soar.
Williams finally went hitless on June 8th, and his 23-game hit streak ended. DiMaggio, though, continued on and on and on.
Joe DiMaggio keeps his hitting streak alive.
One of the great things about the rivalry that ultimately developed between Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams was that they actually had a connecting element in Joe's brother Dominic.
Joe's brother is Ted's teammate out there in center field. Amazing.
That year in 41, I just loved to listen to him talk about the guy in the scoreboard in left field with a ticker tape, calling out what DiMaggio did with each at bat. And Ted would then relay it over to Dominic in center field.
Every time Joe got a base hit, he would yell over to me, "Dommy," he said, "Joe got a base hit in the first inning."
DiMaggio's streak reached 45 games on July 2nd, setting the all-time Major League record.
Joe's line drive into the stands turned a new page in baseball history.
He was now arguably the biggest star in America. Up in Boston, meanwhile, Ted Williams was still hitting over 400.
Ted Williams was a guy with an ego. He was a guy with a lot of pride. For the most part, he played second fiddle to the guy playing in New York.
You have DiMaggio sort of stealing the spotlight.
Sports reporters joined the name of DiMaggio with such greats as Cobb and Root.
DiMaggio's feat was so improbable even then. And Williams, there had been within memory people who had hit 400.
There was some jealousy there, yes. In some respects, he envied Joe.
And then at the All-Star game, Ted Williams comes up, and it's his story from then on.
The 41 All-Star game would be played in Detroit, Michigan. In those years, the All-Star game was as big an event as anything in the sport. The only opportunity outside the World Series for AL and NL players to compete. A chance every star treasured to prove themselves against the very best.
You had an incredible array of great players in 1941 gathered. And the fact is that for the American League, the 3 and 4 hitters happened to be, oh, by the way, Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams.
DiMaggio was unmistakably the center of attention, starting in his 6th All-Star game with his hitting streak still in progress at 48. Williams was the brazen kid from Boston in his first All-Star start.
Say, Ted, got any base hits in that bat of yours?
Oh, I think I'm going to do all right.
He always said that Detroit was his favorite park in which to hit it.
Well, I've always hit good in this Detroit park. They throw in where I'm swinging, and I'll be swinging. Might mean the old ball game.
The game went to the bottom of the 9th, with the American League trailing 5-3.
Ninth inning, more than 54,000 in Detroit's Briggs Stadium wait in anticipation. Claude Passeau delivers ball 4. He walks Cecil Travis. That loads the bases with 1 out.
They loaded the bases, and Joe DiMaggio came up.
Up comes Joe DiMaggio.
But everybody thought this would be the perfect, absolutely perfect fairy tale ending. Joe DiMaggio on this hitting streak, the most famous ball player on planet Earth.
DiMaggio, the hitter, Passeau's pitch, ground ball to short.
But what does he do? He bounces out. He manages to beat the throw to first, just by a hair step, kind of a wild throw.
Great DiMaggio almost ended it, hitting into a double play.
I've often looked back and thought, if I'd have been hitting 3rd and Joe'd have been hitting 4th that day, and I would have hit that ball, I'd have been a double play. But he just beat it with that little extra speed.
How do you like this for a setting? 2 outs. The tying run at 3rd, the winning run at 1st, last half of the 9th inning, and the 400 hitter of today at the plate, Ted Williams.
Did Claude Passeau give you any kind of a pitch that was foreign? For instance, like a ball that might have had a little saliva on it?
No, he might have thrown it to you.
Williams takes a strike from Claude Passeau.
He thought he got to buy me a little bit, see? And luckily he threw it the same place.
Passeau pitches, Williams swings, there's a high drive, going deep, deep. It is a home run.
Ted Williams has just won the All-Star game with a 9th inning dramatic 3-run home run.
He hit the home run. He's clapping his hands like he's in a Little League game.
He actually went into a gallop. He was so happy about it.
At least for that one moment, who was the hero of the All-Star game? It wasn't Joe DiMaggio, even though he had his opportunity. It was Ted Williams.
Is there anybody who can get him out?
For any moment in his life that stood out, the one that he loved the most was that home run in the All-Star game.
Yes, hitting that home run in the All-Star game in the 9th inning was certainly a big thrill, and I'll never forget the rest of my life.
And when he talked about it years later, it was the same. He would talk about it like, no doubt about it, that was it.
It was the biggest thrill I ever got in baseball.
And you've said that.
It happened just at the right time in a young player's career, and it was my first start in an All-Star game.
And it wasn't like, oh, I hit a home run and, I was the headline. It was all about that it was a competition with the greatest players in the world. That he won the game. He beat the greatest players in the world.
Oh, boy, that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
And what a lot. That turned what looked to be a National League win into an American League 7-5 win.
I don't think anything ever hit me quite like that did.
When Ted would come to the ballpark and the riders would follow him into the clubhouse, Ted would go, "Where's Boggs?" And I'd be sitting in my locker, and he'd come over, and the media would follow him. He did not want the media to hear what we were talking about. And we talked for about 15, 20 minutes, and we just talked about fishing. And then they'd come back over and ask, and I said, "Yeah, we were talking about line class and tying knots and tying dry flies and things." And they all wander off. They wanted that tidbit that Ted was giving me, that solution on how to hit 400. And the one regret that I have that sticks with me every day is that I never asked Ted to go fishing. Maybe one day, Ted, we'll share the boat together, brother.
Here are the two superstars who cannot be matched in the game of baseball today. Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio.
1941 is so divided. You know, you have DiMaggio for most of the spring and early summer, and then Ted Williams, this extraordinary average that's up above that 400 cliff.
I mean, everybody knew that what DiMaggio was doing with his hitting streak was a finite thing. At some point, that hitting streak would end.
Safe hits in 56 consecutive games.
And essentially, it was contained to 2 months, from May until July.
Hitting streak, done. Average, not so much. Let's see what happens the rest of the summer. And it has the same sort of high baseball drama as the first half of the season. Did he hit one? And now it's, you know, what's he batting? What's it going to be?
It was July 17th, 1941, when Joe DiMaggio finally went hitless in a game. With the streak over, the eyes of the nation finally turned in full towards the kid in Boston, making a bid for 400.
Then 41, of course, the 400 thing got bigger as the season went on, you know, because a lot of guys did 400 for 2 months, but then here's 3 and now here's 4. Geez, I'm hitting 412, 413, you know? Wait, gosh, I'm hitting 400 plus, good.
I would have loved to have been a kid with my heart pounding and my stomach tense, riding each day's box score to try to figure out how Ted was doing.
Goes into his windup. Here's the initial pitch, and there's a drive going out to center field for a hit.
I never, in any year, hit the ball as consistently on the nose. Boy, oh boy, I just seemed to, every ball I hit was on the big part of the bat.
It's not just confidence. You got to be a little arrogant to be able to believe that no matter who's pitching, whether it's raining, whether it's 95 degrees out, whether it's 33 degrees out, you're going to get your 2 hits every 5 times up.
Ted is a tall, lanky boy, but he can really hit that onion.
Ted wasn't getting those short bunt base hits or those infield hits.
They didn't know whether to pitch me high, they didn't know whether to pitch me low. And the league was made to order for me then. I knew the pitchers, I was stronger, I had more confidence. I had the league betwixt and between.
If it seemed like there was no defense that could stop Williams, some teams did take drastic measures.
Jimmy Dykes was a very colorful player and then a manager of the Chicago White Sox, and he was tired of watching Williams wear his team out game after game. One day, Jimmy Dykes decided he was going to combat Williams by trying to overload the right side of the infield. Obviously, in 2016, that is a common sight now. But in 1941, it looked like something was wrong. And when Ted saw this, he laughed, and he said, "Jimmy, what's wrong with you?"
Well, I was almost embarrassed because I thought, what are they trying to do, make a joke out of this thing? Third baseman played shortstop, way over towards shortstop. The shortstop played right behind second base. And I have 3 guys lined up.
And he promptly hit a ball down the third base line.
It was such a cheap hit that it kind of humiliated them. And as a result, they start moving around and getting more normal position for me.
If Ted wanted to hit 500, he would hit 500 on that shift. There's no way that Ted couldn't hit a line drive to the left side of the field when he wanted to.
Then it only lasted a short time before Jimmy Dykes understood that there really was no defense for Ted Williams, certainly not in 1941.
All through August and into September, Williams' average remained comfortably above 400. His hitting was captivating the country, and he was making headlines off the field as well.
Red Sox had a day off one day, and he went fishing in an area that hadn't produced a fish in close to 6 weeks. The local fisherman had told Ted Williams this was a catchless area. And such were the great powers of his confidence at that point, he produces a 374-pound tuna. And that was in the front page of all the newspapers, and everybody scratched their head wondering if there was anything that Ted Williams, at age 23, couldn't do.
On September 21st, the anticipation was growing at Fenway when Ted Williams took the field in the Sox final home game of the season. Going into the day, Williams was hitting .406.
Ted Williams coming up, and you can hear that crowd in the background. Here's the pitch, and there's a high fly ball in there for a home run.
He hits a home run for the Fenway faithful and then heads off to see if he can keep his average above that magical line.
There were just 6 road games left to play, and he'd given himself some breathing room. But even for the great Ted Williams, it would be anything but easy.
The Red Sox go out on the road. There's 6 games left, 3 in Washington, 3 in Philadelphia. And Ted was told pretty much going into that final road trip that over those 6 games he needed to get 5 hits.
And then I ran into just a little bit of a cold streak. Not any slumps, but just a little bit of a cold streak. And I was hitting the ball pretty good, but they made 3 or 4 good catches in that last week. And before I knew it, I was down to 399.6. I was technically 400. The first time that wasn't a 4 in front of the batting average all year, and I was a little uptight about that.
He could have sat out the doubleheader against the Philadelphia A's, and he would have hit 400 on the nose officially. But that wouldn't have been him.
He said to me, I don't care about 3,996 or whatever it is. I'm going to play.
It would have been officially 400, but it never entered my mind. Never once. Never did I even have any thought. I didn't even give it a thought. I never even thought about not playing.
The idea that it never even occurred to Ted Williams to do that speaks to who Ted Williams was and how much it meant to him to not only hit 400, but to do it the right way.
It just showed what character Ted had, that this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do it with style, and I'm going to get the job done. Ted always got the job done. He's the John Wayne of baseball.
I said to him, you know, you really are the guy that John Wayne played in all those movies. Except you're not playing a role. You are that John Wayne character. And he paused for a second, and he goes, yeah, I know it.
But if John Wayne never seemed afraid of anything in the movies, his real-life counterpart had some anxiety on the eve of the season's final day.
I walked around that night with the clubhouse boy, Johnny Orlando, and we walked around and he kept saying, kid, don't worry about it. Everything's all set.
I think the pressure was really eating him, and he had a crisis of some sort. It was very much unlike a Williams to sort of pace the streets with anybody else.
All I was worried about is, boy, I hope I can get some hits tomorrow.
His entire existence was as a hitter. And so what's the one thing as a hitter you want more than anything else? You want to hit 400.
I wanted it more than anything, more so than anything in my life.
And here it is with his grasp. He's already made the decision he's going to play, but understood that he didn't want to be known as the guy who went into the final day of the regular season with an opportunity at 400 and didn't get there.
Remember this date, fans, September 28, 1941. It may be a history-making day. Red Sox and A's in a doubleheader here at Shibe Park in Philadelphia. But all eyes are on this man, Ted Williams, gunning for a 400 season. He's hitting an even 400. I think if I were Ted, I would sit out today, but Ted never backed into anything.
I got up to the plate, and I'm all set to hit. The pitcher was taking the sign, and all of a sudden, Bill McGowan, the umpire, stopped the game, and he turned his back towards the pitcher, and he started wiping the plate again. Right. It was perfectly clean, but he started wiping the plate again, and he said, in order to hit 400, he says, you got to be loose.
A lot of players, when they're told, you got to stay loose, all of a sudden you get all tight and you say, oh my God, I'm trying to hit 400. What am I doing here? But Ted Williams just laughed and he's like, you got it. That's right. That's what I got to do.
First time I got up, Bob Johnson was playing first base that day, and I hit a ball sharply by him. And of course, that was a great hit for me because, you know, it got me going a little bit.
He hit a single the first time at bat, a home run the second time at bat.
Long drive, deep right field. The
2 singles after that. That's the first game.
And after you hit 400 in the first game, is it true that that Joe said you could sit out the second game?
Yes, it is. And I felt pretty confident, and I thought, well, I might as well just go on out and play the second game, which I did, and I got a couple more hits that game.
In the second game, a double that knocks out the public address horn in right field.
Williams, a line drive, blue darter. It hits the horn in right field, and Ted has himself a double. Ted finishes the doubleheader 6 for 8.
He goes 6 for 8 in the 2 games, and he winds up hitting 406.
6 for 8 over those 2 games.
Instead of batting 400, he winds up with 406. Robert Redford led the production of The Natural. He was a big Ted Williams fan. And in the movie, he insisted on wearing number 9.
What about 9?
9? Oh, you got me. 9 it is.
He insisted on batting 3rd in the order. That was where Ted batted. He insisted that he wanted...
When I walk down the street, people look at me and say, there goes Roy Hobbs, the best there ever was.
Now, he wanted to be the greatest. Ted just wanted to be the greatest hitter.
It has now been 75 years since anyone last hit 400. It's just so hard to do. And what's the difference between hitting 390 and hitting 400? A few line drives that are right at somebody, a few bloops that didn't drop. That's the difference.
Everything has to go right. You have to have everything just right with a great year, an outstanding player, a lot of breaks to get to do that.
No one has hit 400 in the 75 years since Ted Williams did it, but a few have come close, including Williams himself, who hit 388 at age 39 in 1957. 20 years after that, another star made a bid. A star, in fact, who Williams himself once predicted would do it.
The press put the 400 tab on me, getting the idea from Ted Williams after Ted saw me hit, and saying that Rod Carew is going to be the next guy to hit 400. I've never made that a goal. It's a struggle trying to hit 300, so it'd be a tougher struggle trying to hit 400.
The largest crowd in Twins history came out Sunday to see Rod Carew reach for the 400 hitting barrier. And the hot hitter came through with 4 hits to push his average to the magic mark.
Things just fell into place. You know, I would hit balls that were just, you know, maybe 2 or 3 inches out of the reach of a player that would go by them. So, you know, I was hitting balls just right out of the reach of players. It was just one of those years that everything just went right for me.
In the last 3 decades, Carew is the first batter to approach July that mark. Hitting 400 under the tough conditions of modern baseball, Mike Brate is the greatest batting feat ever.
I learned that it's one of the toughest things to cope with because wherever I went, you know, people were always there. There's always a camera there. I couldn't do anything. I kind of lost my privacy.
Maintaining that concentration, that was tough. For me, it was tough because I was starting to make mistakes on the field and it started to affect me. And I just said, I can't do this. I've got to think about the other guys around me, too.
Carew was hitting over 400 as late as mid-July, but faded after the All-Star break and finished at 388.
Another guy was George Brett, who was over 400 in 1980 in September.
No one in decades has been able to do what he's done, carry a 400 average into September.
It was just one of those years where the game was in slow motion to me. The ball looked bigger than normal. I could pick up the spin on the ball better. Lefties didn't bother me. I felt very, very confident every time I was going to go to the plate that I was going to not get a hit, but I was very confident I was going to hit the ball hard. Little did I know that I was going to be over 400 with 2 weeks to go in the season.
Brett's cheerful nature will be severely tested. He will be filmed, taped, interviewed, and hounded on and off the field. To bat 400, Brett will have to isolate himself from the pressure.
You know, pressure, it's a weird thing. When Roger Maris in 61 was trying to hit 61 home runs, his hair came out. And sure enough, I never had a hemorrhoid problem in my life. I came down with hemorrhoids, and I didn't know what it was at first. And so I said, you know, something's bothering me. And our trainer looked, and he says, oh, you got some bad hemorrhoids. We go to a proctologist. I get there, and the doctor says, well, have you been under any pressure lately? I go, have I been under any pressure? And I told him what was going on, and he said, you're a perfect candidate for hemorrhoids.
All eyes
they start to turn to the plate. Everything stops in the ballpark. Round of applause for George Brett, now hitting at .405.
Now, after talking about it every day for a month, I did the one thing I shouldn't have tried to do, was tried to go out and hit 400. I tried to get 2 hits every 5 at-bats.
Brett would finish 1980 with a .390 mark, the closest anyone came to Williams since '41, until another future Hall of Famer made his own bid.
Tony Gwynn is a great hitter.
Gwynn has his 6th hit of the night.
94, it didn't matter who was pitching, it didn't matter where we were playing, it didn't matter. I was seeing the ball good, and I was moving the ball around. I was extremely confident.
Fair ball. The beat rolls on as these runners average up to 389.
That guy can flat out hit.
Numerically, Gwynn came the closest. He was hitting .394 in August of 1994 when the strike ended the season.
There is a tinge of tragedy attached to 1994 because Gwynn, who in a lot of ways was the heir to Williams because he was from San Diego, because he was left-handed, because he was so obsessive about the purity of hitting.
Front foot is locked in. It's just solid. It's a solid front leg. As long as this front foot is going almost towards shortstop, not quite, between short and second base, I know that I'm okay.
He's also a guy who would have been immune to the pressure, would have been immune to the media scrutiny. It would have been great to see what he would have been able to do the last 7 or 8 weeks of that season, but we were robbed of that in 1994, unfortunately.
During that offseason, I was the MC of an occasion where they opened the Ted Williams Hitters Museum, and Tony Gwynn was among the many great players who attended. And so we did an interview in which Gwynn and Williams are sitting around a table. And Ted, as he liked to do, would quiz people.
If you were underneath, were you early or late? I mean, if you're underneath the pitch, what are you, generally early or late?
If you're underneath the pitch.
And as Williams is posing this question, Gwynn has a look on his face like the kid in the back of the room in the 4th grade who hopes he won't be called on because he hasn't really read all the social studies material and he's afraid he won't know the answer.
Well, see, that's different with me. I say late.
And Ted goes,
I say late, too.
Okay.
And Gwynn breathes a sigh of relief. He's Tony freaking Gwynn, for God's sake. He's going to win 8 batting titles. Oh, my gosh, thank you. I gave Ted Williams the right answer.
All right, remember on your big next salary raise, don't forget about it.
Gwynn, Brett, and Carew were all in the midst of Hall of Fame careers when they took their shot at 400. Their near misses, each serving as a reminder of the incredible difficulty of what Ted Williams accomplished 75 years ago.
In 1986, Peter Gammons approached myself and Don Mattingly to do an article with Ted Williams. We talked for 4.5 hours. I think it was probably around 9:30, quarter of 10, when Ted said, you could really tell yourself when you ride on the ball and you foul a ball right back and you smell that wood-burning smell. And I went, Ted, I've never smelled that. And he goes, come on. And he'd go into it and everything. And then Donnie said, oh, yeah, I've smelt that quite often and everything. He says, that's right, good hitters smell it and everything like this. The very next day, we were in Clearwater playing the Phillies. I fouled the ball back and smelt it. And from that point on, I used to smell it all the time.
Over a 19-year career, Ted Williams compiled a tremendous case for earning the title, the greatest hitter who ever lived. Even though he missed 5 seasons in his prime serving in the military, Williams earned 6 batting titles, 2 Triple Crowns, hit 521 home runs, and had a lifetime .344 batting average, and the highest on-base percentage in baseball history. Still, as the years passed, hitting .406 in 1941 would be recognized as his greatest feat, even by the man himself.
I regard it now 10 times more an accomplishment than I did at that particular time, because I thought, well, I'm going to hit 400 some more because I'm just getting started here.
It has now been 75 years since anyone last hit 400. And during those 75 years, the game has changed considerably.
I think it's a number that nobody even thinks about anymore, to be honest with you. I don't think anybody's out there thinking they're going to hit 400.
It'll never be done again. When you look at the hitters nowadays, Altuve is probably the closest, and he's around 345, 350. And when you think about another 50-point jump just to stay at 400.
Even the very best hitters today strike out a pretty fair percentage of the time. It works against the infield hits, the bloop hits, the balls in play that help you hit 400. And then you also have to walk a lot. And then you got to hit 400 in the official plate appearances that you get. That's a lot to ask.
You think we'll ever see anyone hit 400 again?
For my part, Peter, I don't think it can be done. I don't think someone's going to hit 400 again. I just think the state of relief pitching now with these guys throwing 98 miles an hour, you don't see any worn-out guys.
Well, all the analytics guys upstairs telling managers how to run their pitching staffs, you see one pitcher for 2 at-bats, and you don't see another pitcher for 2 at-bats again.
I think it's almost, I think it is impossible to hit 400 now.
In retirement, the magic number of 406 and the man who made it famous were irrevocably linked. There was no legend quite like Ted Williams. And everywhere he went, everyone wanted to talk to him and learn from him.
We had a second act. Most people retire and that's it. But he stayed in the limelight. People were interested in him.
We've been here at NBC for 11 years, and I would have to say that we have never had as big a star, as true a legend from the sport of baseball as here tonight, and it's a great thrill to meet you.
Probably more than anything else, Ted Williams wanted to not just expose his knowledge, but be instructive forever.
If I'm close to the plate, and that ball's here, I got to hit it out in front, don't I? Huh? Now I'm forcing myself to hit the ball shorter distance again.
Hitters coming up, hitters 50 years from now can pick up that book, Science of Hitting, and sure enough, there's all that they need to know.
There's no question. When I was a young fellow, I asked everybody in the world that I thought could hit a question about hitting or how I was going to be a better hitter. And I think that any young hitter today that hasn't read that book, I got to give him a minus for not being enthusiastic enough to go out and get every bit of information he can.
In 1999, the All-Century team was celebrated at the All-Star Game in Boston, the greatest assemblage of baseball talent ever to stand together on a diamond. But the biggest attraction that night, by far, was the 81-year-old.
An iconic moment for the game. It showed the respect that all the modern All-Stars had for Williams.
It was something about the way everybody crowded around the cart that Ted was in that reminded me of kids. And these were all All-Stars.
Just flocked around him. The announcer said, "It's time to go back to your dugouts," and they wouldn't go.
I remember from where I used to have my seats in back of home plate, Dwight Evans was 1 row down and across the little bar. So Dwight leaned over to me and said, "What do you think he said to Mark McGwire?" I said, "I can guarantee you," he asked, "you ever smell the bat burn?" Afterwards, I went into the clubhouse to go talk to McGwire just to make sure that it was right. So I went up to him and I said, "When Ted called you over, what did he ask?" He said, "You know very well what he asked me." But, so Mark Grace was next to me. And Gracie said, "What did you guys just talk about?" I said, "Ted asked him, you ever smelled the bat burn?" And Gracie went, "What does that mean?" I said, "Mark, we're mortals. We're here. They're up there." And that's that.
You've heard a lot about natural hitters. Well, a natural hitter has probably worked longer and harder than anybody else. There's no shortcuts.
When Theodore Samuel Williams died in 2002, the number 400 was affixed to his identity as immutably as his middle name. The last 400 hitter. Every valediction, chose the same honorific.
He was the last man to hit 400, but he was so much more.
Williams owns 400 the way DiMaggio does 56. Rose 42-56, and Ripken 26-32. Baseball venerates its numbers like no other sport. They are the language of its mythology. But in this pantheon of greatness, Williams occupies a singular space. It's not just because after 75 years he remains the last 400 hitter, or that no one has come close. None past September 19th, where George Brett stood with 2 weeks left in the 1980 season. The wonder of Williams is not that he hit 400, it's how he did it. On September 28, 1941, the last day of the season, Williams awoke with a batting average of .399.6. For record-keeping purposes, it would be rounded to 400, and there it would forever stand if Williams sat out a meaningless doubleheader. But if Williams had looked at the newspaper that morning, Ted would have seen this headline: "Star batter slips below 400. 3.996 wasn't 400, and Williams knew it."
And now to bat comes Ted Williams.
He took the field and smashed 6 hits, raising his final mark to 406.
Ted Williams, listen to the roar.
The late paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould called Ted's 1941 season the greatest achievement in 20th century hitting, and a lesson to all who value the best in human possibility. That season defined sustained brilliance. Over the course of Joe DiMaggio's record-hitting streak that year, Ted actually out-hit Joe 412 to 408. Williams had more home runs, 37, than strikeouts, just 27. All he did, pitch after pitch, day after day, month after month, was hit the baseball squarely more consistently than anybody in the 75 years that followed.
Williams just let go and hit one of the biggest home runs that's ever been hit.
His last hit was a cinematic masterpiece, a line drive double that broke a loudspeaker in right field. The reverberations have never stopped. On that day in 1941, Williams defined himself as a man of action. Just 2 years later, Williams was a Marine Corps fighter pilot in World War II. And 9 years after that, he was flying bombing missions over Korea. Then, on September 28, 1960, 19 years to the day when he became the last 400 hitter, Williams swung the bat for the last time.
There's a drive to deep right center. This may be gone. Brett way back there watching. Home run. Ted Williams.
The man of action hit a home run at Fenway Park in his last at-bat.
Well, if you had written it that way, nobody would believe it, so I even tried.
The majesty of the moment, not just captured, but also equaled by John Updike in one of America's greatest essays. Hub fans bid Kid adieu. Though we thumped, wept, and chanted, "We want Ted," for minutes after he hid in the dugout, he did not come back. Gods do not answer letters. As a young ball player, Williams had one goal: to walk down the street and have people remark, "There goes the greatest hitter who ever lived." It's a subjective title, but of this there can be no debate. The legend of Ted Williams owes much of its permanence to September 28, 1941. On that day, in the spirit of rugged individualism that defines America, Williams became the last 400 hitter. He took a risk. He rolled the dice. He didn't play it safe, and he came through. 75 years later, we still haven't seen anything like it.